Hello, and welcome to session 15 in our series. We'll now discuss what can happen when people don't come together in the proper way. I'll give you an example of what can happen when people of like mind don't come together ideologically as well as physically. I remember when the 80s changed to the 90s, and on Earth Day there were vast numbers of people on television who were representing many environmental groups. Many of them went before the camera one after another, and they spoke all day and on into the evening about the problems in our planet's environment and about the goals of their particular organization that they felt would help fix those problems. Many of them represented groups with large numbers of members. At the end of that day and on into the future, until even the present day, however, little, if anything, has changed, and the country still has great need, and in point of fact far greater need, of significant change to further protect the environment and even the planet as a whole, because the planet is undergoing significant climate changes and other changes, and most of the people who live here do not understand the danger that will be coming to us all if we don't make the needed changes soon. This is a sad testimonial to the error of like-minded people who insist on working only for their own agenda and who are not willing to come together ideologically with others of like mind to work side by side for a common goal. If all of those groups that we talked about on that Earth Day would have come together ideologically as successfully as they did physically, by amassing in great numbers that day, and if by then they had already agreed upon a common agenda, their combined strength would have then been a force that those in control of the government would have had to consider, and positive change would have been a great deal more likely to occur. Whether we want to change government policies and laws to protect our environment, or to change other equally damaging government policies as well as additional negative conditions, we must come together with a common goal, a common agenda. What happened that day is also a sad testimonial to the effectiveness of those few, the extremely wealthy elite, who are able to maintain a level of divisiveness among the people whenever the people seek to change and improve the status quo. A level of divisiveness so great that few significant changes for the good of the people ever really take place. Let's talk more now about positive change that helps the people. There are many people all over our country and around the world who want positive change and who see the need for that kind of change, a need that has now become a necessity for change that will benefit the great majority of the people and the country itself, as well as the entire planet. I'm not speaking now currently of the popular Tea Party movement. They're a tool, whether wittingly or unwittingly, of those at the top, and they're dividing the country even further. They're without realistic positive goals, only divisive ones. I'm interested in talking about change that would include things like quality education, including college, for everyone, universal single-payer health insurance and health care for all the people, and change that would make these things available at very low cost, or ideally that they'd be at no cost at all, so that they can be enjoyed by all the people. There should also be additional jobs as well as retraining for industries that have experienced declining numbers of jobs that are not likely to return. That training should include child care for the children of the trainees so that the trainees need not worry about their children during the training process. These are just a few of the changes that should be carefully and thoughtfully planned, funded, and carried out. In addition, we must get rid of all offshore tax shelters. We must reform the tax system so it'll be equitable and fair for all, and stop unnecessary corporate subsidies and welfare. Corporate welfare. You get the idea. This could happen if enough people of like mind are willing to come together with a common purpose and a common goal, and if that purpose and that goal are worthwhile and truly for the benefit of all. Then the goals can and will meet with eventual success. Positive change can come to your city, to your state, to your country, and even to your planet, if enough people who want it come together in a nonviolent way and work for a common purpose. Today you may ask where the funds for such things can be found. My response is that there was no problem finding all the necessary funding when the previous administration wanted to fight 2 wars, or when that same administration, through lack of regulation and oversight, allowed the greatest worldwide financial collapse since the Great Depression, and massive funding had to be found to keep the corporate structure afloat. That same corporate structure that caused the problem in the first place. Excuse me. Then, to add insult to injury, those in that corporate structure were given the money with no conditions. There were no strings attached. Nothing had to be done except take the money and spend it in whatever way they wanted. The working people and families of the United States and other working people around the world have been in equally dire straits for years, but there was no headlong rush to help them in a massive way. Aren't people more important than corporations? It would appear that they're not considered to be, given the way that the current system under which we live now works. You must remember that a corporation is not a human being. It has no soul. We know these things to be true, so we should be asking why the laws and the courts have not only given corporations the same rights as human beings, but why have the laws and the courts even given corporations a legal advantage over human beings? Trying to point out problems and suggest solutions is a process seldom accomplished without detractors. There are powerful interests in the United States and around the world who have a vested interest in the status quo. They want continued cheap labor and unemployment which perpetuates cheap labor, and they've used the media and other means over a great many years to persuade a large percentage of the population that change is bad, or even worse, that change is something to fear. Those who suggest that there are problems and that positive change that helps people and families is needed are too often met by the response that somehow those changes, unless they directly benefit the most wealthy among us, are bad for America and for society as a whole. Too often you'll hear the words, "Hey, this is America. Love it or leave it." Hundreds of millions of people, and I include myself, love America very much. But if we see where people are suffering by the hundreds of thousands or even by the millions and remain quiet in an attempt to do nothing because trying to fix those problems and pointing out the conditions that cause them is going to cause us to be called un-American, then I ask you, who is truly being un-American? Those who recognize that there are problems and are willing to work to fix the problems? Or those who see them happening believe that things should be left alone because it, quote, isn't patriotic, unquote, to point out that change is needed, or that we can do even better? Who's being the real patriot? Who's being the good Samaritan? If we see the air being polluted and the streams being poisoned by pesticides and we simply leave or keep quiet, how will these serious problems get fixed? As long as it reduces the bottom line a bit to fix things, the political and corporate establishment aren't going to bother. They'll very likely do a lot to make it appear that they're going to make significant positive change, but they really aren't going to bother other than to give lip service to the changes that are needed. In addition, they'll cry loudly that the country will be ruined beyond repair whenever Congress does, on rare occasions, step up to try to improve things for the people, for the environment, for the infrastructure, and for the country and the world. You'll hear cries, as we did recently during and after the health care debate, even though many characterize that legislation as being to the political right of that which Richard Nixon proposed years ago. There were cries of socialism and communism and economic ruin for the country, etc., whenever we see work being done to help the people. You need to be aware that there were conservatives saying exactly the same things when legislation was being debated and acted upon during the 20th century to create unemployment compensation, Social Security, voting rights, Medicare, and other social legislation designed to help and to protect the average citizens of this country. Those same cries were being heard at each one of those occasions. As you can see, they were wrong then, and they continue to be wrong today. They're trying to make you afraid of change that will be of benefit to you and your family. And as long as they can successfully accomplish bringing about that fear to prevent you from accepting positive change that's a benefit to you, then they can keep most of us desperate to find and keep working in order to pay our bills, regardless of whatever salary or benefits that the wealthy see fit to pay. The cries of socialism and economic ruin are to make you afraid of exploring all the possibilities that are available. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Be so afraid that you'll adamantly refuse to consider the idea that perhaps healthcare should not be a place to keep raising the prices to make ever greater profits. That's what they're trying to tell you. Should we be insisting that great profits should be made off the pain and misery of the elderly and the sick? They want you to believe that the government is incapable of doing anything worthwhile. Then you vote them into power, and they do things to make certain that the government doesn't work the way it was designed to do. Change is needed, and those who would benefit the most from this change keep voting into power those who will make certain that the needed changes never occur. If we who love America yet still see needed changes just leave it, who will be left to cry out for right when so many wrongs are being perpetrated against so many decent people in our country and around the world each and every day? Who will be left to do the work needed to get the changes accomplished that are so desperately needed by so many? No one would be left who really cared about solving the problems. That's no solution to anything. Thank you for watching. In session 16, we'll mention what I have not suggested as a solution. You'll be interested to find out what that is. Thank you for watching.